They think I'm just another aging employee they can toss aside. They have no idea what's about to hit them. Sarah Chen stared at the dismissal paperwork in front of her, fighting to keep the smile off her face. After 16 years at DataFlow Solutions, they were showing her the door. But unlike the tears they expected, Sarah felt only anticipation. Because 3 weeks ago, she'd intercepted an email that changed everything. The conference room felt smaller than usual that Thursday morning. Across the polished table sat Rebecca Morrison, the newly appointed operations director, and James from Human Resources. Both wore those practiced expressions of corporate sympathy that meant absolutely nothing. "Sarah, I know this comes as a shock," Rebecca began, her voice dripping with false concern. "But DataFlow is restructuring its priorities. We need to streamline our technical divisions." Translation: they wanted younger, cheaper talent. At 57, Sarah had become too expensive, too experienced, too much of a reminder of what real innovation looked like. James slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a generous severance package. 3 weeks for every year of service, extended health benefits for 6 months, and access to our career transition services." Sarah picked up the folder without opening it. She already knew what was inside. More importantly, she knew what wasn't inside. Any mention of the neural network architecture she'd developed. The same architecture that powered DataFlow's crown jewel, Quantum Ledger, the financial software that dominated 45% of the enterprise market. "I appreciate the company's consideration," Sarah said calmly. "When would you like me to complete my transition?" Rebecca and James exchanged surprised glances. They'd prepared for anger, for pleading, maybe even threats of legal action. They hadn't prepared for acceptance. "We were thinking end of day tomorrow," Rebecca said, gaining confidence. "That should give you time to transfer your projects and collect your personal items." "Perfect," Sarah replied. "I'll have everything wrapped up by then." As she stood to leave, James called after her. "Sarah, we'll need your security badge, company laptop, and phone before you go." "Of course," she said over her shoulder. "Wouldn't want to leave with anything that belongs to DataFlow." The irony in her voice went completely over their heads. Walking back to her corner office, Sarah passed the executive suite where CEO Marcus Goldman was holding court with potential investors. Through the glass walls, she could see him gesturing at charts showing Quantum Ledger's market dominance. The same Marcus who'd introduced her at last year's tech summit as one of our many talented developers. Not the inventor, not the architect, just one of many. Sarah closed her office door and pulled out her personal phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. "Meeting went as expected. Tomorrow is my last day." The response was immediate. "Excellent. Everything is prepared on our end. Shall we meet Saturday to finalize?" "Looking forward to it," Sarah typed back. She leaned back in her chair, gazing at the awards lining her bookshelf. 16 years of innovation, of late nights debugging code, of breakthroughs that had transformed DataFlow from a startup to an industry giant. And this was how it ended. Or so they thought. The trouble had started 7 months ago when Sarah began developing enhancements to her neural network architecture. She'd made a point of working exclusively at home, on her personal equipment, documenting every hour spent outside of company time. The improvements were staggering. A 52% increase in processing efficiency, with the ability to handle datasets 3 times larger than the current version. But when she'd presented the concepts to Marcus, he'd waved her off. "The current system works fine. No need to rock the boat." That's when Sarah had started paying closer attention to the company's patent filings, or rather, the lack thereof. Despite repeated assurances from legal that her original architecture was protected, she couldn't find any documentation. Her requests for clarification were met with vague promises to look into it. Then came the email that changed everything. 3 weeks ago, a message meant for Rebecca had landed in Sarah's inbox by mistake. The subject line alone had made her blood run cold. Project Phoenix, Transition Timeline. The attached document outlined a comprehensive plan. First, they would restructure the technical division, eliminating redundant senior positions. Then, once the original developers were gone, DataFlow would file patents on all core technologies as company-developed intellectual property. Sarah's name appeared nowhere in the documentation, but that wasn't even the worst part. The timeline showed they'd been planning this for over a year. Every performance review that praised her dedication, every company meeting where Marcus thanked the technical team, every assurance that her contributions were valued, all of it had been a lie. Sarah had read the email 3 times, her mind racing through the implications. Then she'd forwarded it to her personal account, deleted it from her work inbox, and started making plans of her own. Her first call had been to Alexandra Patel, the best intellectual property attorney in Silicon Valley. Her second had been to Jonathan Cross. Saturday afternoon found Sarah at a quiet restaurant in the Arts District, far from DataFlow's glass towers. Jonathan Cross sat across from her, his expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "I still can't believe they actually did it," he said, shaking his head. "Pushing out their lead architect? Marcus has lost his mind." As CEO of Next Gen Systems, DataFlow's primary competitor, Jonathan had watched Sarah's work from afar for years. He'd tried to recruit her multiple times, but she'd always been loyal to DataFlow. Until now. "Loyalty goes both ways," Sarah said, pulling out a folder. "I assume Alexandra has been in touch about the licensing agreement?" "She has." Jonathan's eyes gleamed. "The patent for your enhanced architecture was approved yesterday. Lightning fast, thanks to your meticulous documentation." He paused, studying her face. "Are you sure about the announcement timing?" "Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp," Sarah confirmed. "DataFlow's executives have their weekly meeting at 9. I want them to have just enough time to panic before they gather." "And your team?" Sarah's expression softened. "I've already reached out to them privately. All 7 have agreed to come with me. They're submitting their resignations Monday afternoon." Jonathan whistled softly. "That's going to leave a massive knowledge gap." "They should have thought of that before deciding we were expendable." She signed the final documents with a steady hand, Chief Technology Officer at Next Gen Systems, with a compensation package that made her DataFlow salary look like pocket change. More importantly, she retained all rights to her enhanced architecture, with Next Gen licensing it exclusively. "Welcome to the Next Gen family," Jonathan said, raising his water glass in a toast. "Monday is going to be very interesting." "Yes," Sarah agreed, thinking of Rebecca and Marcus and everyone else who'd underestimated her. "Yes, it is." Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah spent the morning organizing her home office, setting up the secure development environment NextGen had provided. In the afternoon, she video-called each member of her team, walking them through what would happen Monday. "Are you sure about this?" asked David Kim, her senior engineer. "They're going to go nuclear when they realize what's happening." "Let them," Sarah replied. "We've given DataFlow our best years. They chose to repay that by planning to steal our work and show us the door. We owe them nothing beyond professional transition notes." That evening, she received a text from her daughter Emily, who worked as a financial analyst in New York. "Mom, I just saw the press release draft Jonathan sent over. This is huge. I'm so proud of you." Sarah smiled. Emily had watched her mother pour her heart into DataFlow for over a decade and a half. She'd seen the late nights, the missed family dinners, the dedication that went unrecognized. Now, finally, that was about to change. Monday morning arrived with unusual clarity. Sarah woke at 6, did her usual yoga routine, and dressed in her sharpest suit, the navy one she'd bought specifically for this occasion. By 7:30, she was in her car, driving not to DataFlow's campus, but to NextGen's headquarters across the city. At exactly 8 a.m., as Sarah was being introduced to her new team at NextGen, the press release went live across every major tech news platform. NextGen Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary neural architecture, welcomes creator Dr. Sarah Chen as Chief Technology Officer. The announcement detailed Sarah's background, her role as the sole inventor of the enhanced neural network technology, and how NextGen would be integrating it into their next generation of products. Most crucially, It noted that any company currently using the base version of the architecture would need to negotiate licensing agreements for continued use. Sarah's phone began buzzing immediately. She ignored it, focusing instead on her first meeting as CTO. Around the conference table sat some of the brightest minds in technology, and they were all looking at her with genuine respect and anticipation. "Let's talk about the future," she began, pulling up her presentation. "With the enhanced architecture, we can revolutionize how financial data is processed. DataFlow has been coasting on old technology for too long. It's time to show the market what real innovation looks like." Meanwhile, 8 miles away, chaos was erupting at DataFlow Solutions. Marcus Goldman had arrived at the office to find his general counsel and CFO waiting outside his door, both looking like they'd seen a ghost. They thrust a tablet into his hands, the next-gen press release glowing on the screen. "This can't be right," Marcus muttered, reading it again. "Sarah's neural network was developed here. It belongs to DataFlow." "That's what we need to discuss," the general counsel said carefully. "It appears the patent was never actually filed for the original architecture, and this enhanced version she's created was developed entirely on her own time," the CFO finished. "Marcus, we're looking at a catastrophe. Quantum Ledger runs on her architecture. Without licensing rights," Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Without Sarah's architecture, their flagship product was effectively dead in the water. They'd have to either pay whatever licensing fee NextGen demanded or rebuild from scratch, a process that would take years and millions in development costs. "Get Rebecca and James in here now," he barked. "And someone find out what the hell happened with that patent filing." By 9:15, DataFlow's executive conference room was in full crisis mode. Board members were dialing in remotely, the legal team was frantically searching through files, and Rebecca Morrison looked like she might faint. "You assured me she was just another aging developer," Marcus snarled at Rebecca. "You said the transition would be seamless." I didn't know about the patent issue," Rebecca stammered. "The documentation showed the architecture as company property." "The documentation was wrong," the general counsel interrupted. "I've found the original employment agreement. Anything Sarah developed on her own time remains her intellectual property. She followed the contract to the letter." Just then, Marcus's assistant knocked on the door. "Sir?" Sarah Chen's team just submitted their resignations, all 7 of them, effective immediately. The room fell silent. Without Sarah and her team, DataFlow didn't just lose the architecture. They lost everyone who understood how to maintain and develop it. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was from the chairman of the board. With shaking hands, he answered. "Goldman?" The chairman's voice was ice cold. "I'm looking at our stock price. We've dropped 12% in the last hour. Start explaining, now." Back at NextGen, Sarah was wrapping up her morning meetings when her assistant knocked. "Dr. Chen, you have several missed calls from DataFlow's CEO. Should I put him through?" "Please let Mr. Goldman know that all communication should go through NextGen's legal department," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm sure they'll be happy to discuss licensing arrangements." Her phone buzzed with a text from David Kim. "Submitted my resignation. Marcus looked like he was about to have a stroke. The whole floor is in chaos." Sarah felt a twinge of sympathy for the regular employees who would be caught in the crossfire, but she'd made provisions for that too. NextGen had authorized her to extend job offers to any DataFlow employee who wanted to follow her. The brain drain was about to become a flood. By lunch, the tech world was buzzing with the news. "David and Goliath, how one developer brought a tech giant to its knees," read one headline. Another proclaimed, "The real cost of undervaluing talent, DataFlow's billion-dollar mistake." Sarah's inbox was filling with interview requests from major publications. She forwarded them all to NextGen's PR department with a note. "Happy to discuss, but let's wait until after DataFlow responds. The story isn't complete yet." That response came faster than expected. At 2 p.m., DataFlow issued a terse statement claiming ownership of all neural network technology developed by their employees. They announced their intention to pursue legal action to protect their intellectual property. NextGen's legal team was ready. Within an hour, they'd released a comprehensive response that included copies of Sarah's employment agreement, documented proof that the enhanced architecture was developed on personal time, and the approved patent filing in Sarah's name. The market's judgment was swift and brutal. DataFlow's stock price tumbled another 15% by market close. Investment analysts were already downgrading their ratings, citing the company's vulnerability without access to core technology. Tuesday morning brought new developments. Three of DataFlow's major enterprise clients announced they were reviewing their options in light of the technology uncertainty. Translation: they were already in talks with NextGen. Sarah spent the day in back-to-back meetings with her new development team, outlining the roadmap for their new platform. The energy in the room was infectious. These were people who understood the value of innovation and weren't afraid to push boundaries. The enhanced architecture can handle real-time processing of distributed datasets across thousands of nodes, she explained, drawing diagrams on the whiteboard. DataFlow never understood the full potential. They were content to rest on the basic implementation. "How long before we can have a working prototype?" asked one of the senior engineers. "With the team I'm building, 6 weeks for basic functionality, 3 months for full implementation." Sarah smiled. "I've already got most of it mapped out. I've been planning this for months." Meanwhile, the situation at DataFlow continued to deteriorate. Rebecca Morrison had been escorted from the building Monday afternoon, made the scapegoat for the disaster. The head of legal was gone by Tuesday. Rumors swirled that Marcus's own position was in jeopardy. Wednesday brought the call Sarah had been expecting, not from Marcus, but from Catherine Walsh, the chairwoman of DataFlow's board. "Dr. Chen?" Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. "I believe we need to discuss the current situation. I'd be happy to arrange a meeting between you and NextGen's legal team," Sarah replied. "I was hoping we could speak more informally first, woman to woman. I've just discovered the full extent of what transpired, and I'm appalled. You deserved better from DataFlow." It was the first genuine acknowledgement Sarah had received from anyone in DataFlow's leadership. "Yes, I did. Would you consider meeting with me? Not as CTO of NextGen, but as someone who spent 16 years building DataFlow into what it is today?" Sarah considered for a moment. "I can meet you Friday afternoon. Neutral location." "Thank you. And Dr. Chen?" For what it's worth, the board knew nothing about Project Phoenix. "We were told you were leaving voluntarily." After ending the call, Sarah sat quietly for a moment. She'd wondered how deep the deception went. Now she knew. Marcus and Rebecca had lied to everyone, including their own board. Her assistant knocked. "Dr. Chen, the journal wants to know if you'll do an exclusive interview about women in technology and intellectual property rights." "Schedule it for next week," Sarah decided. "This story should be told." Thursday's DataFlow all-hands meeting was, according to Sarah's former colleagues who texted her updates, a masterclass in corporate panic. Marcus tried to project confidence, assuring employees that DataFlow would vigorously defend its intellectual property and continue to innovate without disruption. Nobody believed him. By the end of the day, HR reported that resume updates on LinkedIn from DataFlow employees had increased by 300%. Sarah, meanwhile, was conducting interviews for her expanding team. Word had spread quickly through Silicon Valley's developer network. Dr. Sarah Chen was building something revolutionary at NextGen, and she was hiring. "Why should I leave my current position to join your team?" one candidate asked. "Because here, your innovations will be recognized and protected," Sarah replied. "Your name will be on your work. Your contributions will be valued. I've learned firsthand what happens when companies forget that innovation comes from people, not corporate entities." Friday afternoon, Sarah met Catherine Walsh at a small cafe downtown. The board chair looked tired, stress evident in the lines around her eyes. "We've terminated Marcus Goldman," Catherine said without preamble. The investigation revealed he'd been planning to force out senior developers for over 18 months. The board was deliberately kept in the dark. Sarah sipped her tea, waiting. "We need your architecture, Dr. Chen. Quantum Ledger will fail without it. We're prepared to offer favorable licensing terms and a public apology for how you were treated." I appreciate that, Sarah said carefully. But you need to understand something. This was never about revenge or money. It was about recognition and respect. DataFlow had 16 years to value what I brought to the table. Instead, they tried to steal it. Catherine nodded slowly. What would it take to make this right? Sarah pulled out a single sheet of paper. These are NextGen's licensing terms. They're non-negotiable. The rate reflects the true value of the technology. And yes, there will be a public statement acknowledging Mintzvi as the sole inventor of the neural network architecture. Catherine read through the terms, her face paling slightly at the licensing fee. It was fair, but it would significantly impact DataFlow's profit margins for years to come. I'll recommend the board accept these terms, she said finally. We don't have a choice, do we? You always had a choice, Sarah replied. You chose wrong 16 months ago. This is the consequence. Monday marked 2 weeks since Sarah's dismissal from DataFlow. She stood before a packed auditorium at NextGen, presenting the first glimpse of their new platform powered by her enhanced architecture. The demonstration was flawless, processing speeds that left the audience gasping, handling datasets that would have crashed Quantum Ledger. This is just the beginning, Sarah announced. We're not just improving on existing technology, we're reimagining what's possible. The standing ovation was thunderous. In the audience, she spotted several tech journalists, industry analysts, and, surprisingly, Catherine Walsh. After the presentation, Catherine approached her. The board approved your licensing terms this morning. DataFlow will issue a public statement acknowledging your inventorship by end of day. Good, Sarah said simply. I hope DataFlow learns from this experience. We have. We're implementing new policies to protect and recognize our innovators. Catherine paused. It's too late for you, but hopefully not for others. That evening, as Sarah was leaving the office, her phone buzzed with a news alert. DataFlow's statement was live, prominently featuring her name and contributions. It was followed by news that their stock had stabilized somewhat, though still down nearly 30% from 2 weeks ago. Jonathan Cross stopped by her office. Hell of a day, Dr. Chen. Marketing says the presentation video already has 1 million views. It's been quite a journey, Sarah admitted. From being shown the door to standing here. Any regrets? Sarah thought about it. Only that it took them trying to betray me to finally value my worth. But no regrets. For the first time in my career, I'm exactly where I belong. 6 months later, Sarah stood on stage at the Global Innovation Summit, preparing to deliver the keynote address. In the audience sat hundreds of developers, entrepreneurs, and technology leaders. The introduction was lengthy, detailing her revolutionary work and the dramatic story of how she'd protected her intellectual property. Innovation is personal, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. It comes from individuals who pour their creativity, expertise, and passion into solving problems. When companies forget that, when they treat innovators as replaceable cogs in a machine, they don't just lose employees, they lose their future. She spoke for 40 minutes about the importance of documentation, of knowing your worth, of refusing to let others claim your contributions. The audience was riveted, many taking notes. I spent 16 years believing that loyalty and hard work would be rewarded, Sarah continued. What I learned was that hope is not a strategy. Document everything, know your contracts, and never, ever let anyone convince you that your innovations belong to someone who didn't create them. The applause was deafening. As Sarah left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by young developers seeking advice. One young woman, probably fresh out of college, Ayung-di asked nervously, "How do you find the courage to stand up to an entire company?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey. You realize that the alternative, letting them erase your contributions, is far worse than any risk. Your ideas have value. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Later that evening, at the conference gala, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Goldman, looking considerably older than when she'd last seen him, approached hesitantly. "Sarah," he began, then stopped, clearly struggling for words. I wanted to apologize. Personally, what we did, what I did, was wrong. Sarah studied him for a moment. The former CEO who'd dismissed her contributions, who'd planned to steal her work, now stood before her, humbled and sincere. I appreciate that, Marcus, she said finally. I hope you've learned from it. I have. I'm consulting now, helping startups build ethical practices around intellectual property, trying to make amends, I suppose. As he walked away, Sarah felt a sense of closure. The chapter with DataFlow was truly finished. 1 year after her dismissal, Sarah's enhanced architecture had become the industry standard. NextGen's platform had captured 40% of the market, while DataFlow struggled to maintain relevance despite licensing the technology. The licensing fees they paid to NextGen were a constant reminder of their costly mistake. Sarah's team had grown to over 50 developers, all working on the next evolution of the technology. The culture she'd built was one of recognition and respect. Every contributor was acknowledged, every innovation properly attributed. We've received another acquisition offer, Jonathan informed her during their weekly meeting. Tech Dynamics wants to buy the entire neural network division. Not interested, Sarah replied immediately. We're not selling. We're building something lasting here. Jonathan grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Oh, and Forbes wants to do a cover story. The developer who revolutionized tech by protecting her own work. Sarah considered it. The publicity was useful not for her ego, but for the message it sent to other developers, especially women and older workers in tech. I'll do it, she decided. But I want to focus on the broader issue. How many innovations have been lost because companies didn't value their creators? How many developers have watched their work get attributed to someone else? As she looked out her office window at the Silicon Valley skyline, Sarah reflected on the journey. At 58, when many thought her career was ending, she'd instead reached new heights. Her name was permanently linked to technology that would influence computing for decades to come. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Mom, just saw NextGen's quarterly report. You're crushing it! Dinner Sunday to celebrate? Wouldn't miss it, Sarah typed back. Another message popped up, this one from a former DataFlow colleague who'd recently joined NextGen. 3 more developers from the old team want to jump ship. Should I send them your way? Always room for talent that's properly valued, Sarah responded. As the sun set over the valley, casting golden light through her office, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd lost a job but gained recognition. Lost false loyalty but gained true respect. Lost 16 years of being undervalued but gained a future where her contributions would never be forgotten. The intercom buzzed. Dr. Chen, your 4 o'clock is here. The team wants to show you the new prototype. Sarah stood, energized by the prospect of seeing her latest innovations come to life. This was what she'd always wanted. Not revenge, not just recognition, but the ability to create freely, with her name proudly attached to every breakthrough. Walking toward the development lab, she passed a wall displaying NextGen's patents. Her name featured prominently on 7 of them, with more pending. Each one was a reminder that innovation has an author, and that author deserves credit. The young developers in the lab looked up as she entered, their faces bright with excitement. Dr. Chen, wait until you see what we've achieved with the parallel processing module. As they launched into their demonstration, Sarah smiled. This was her legacy, not just the technology, but the culture of recognition she'd built. Every person in this room knew their contributions mattered, their innovations would be protected, and their names would be remembered. DataFlow had thought they were dismissing an aging, replaceable employee. Instead, they'd freed a visionary to change an entire industry. And Sarah Chen's story had become a cautionary tale told in boardrooms across Silicon Valley. Value your innovators, or watch them build your competition's future. The prototype hummed to life on the screen, processing data at speeds that seemed impossible just years ago. Sarah leaned in, already seeing possibilities for improvement, her mind racing with new ideas. She was 58 years old, at the peak of her creative powers, and finally getting the recognition she deserved. The best part? She was just getting started.